read a somewhat disturbing story the other day about a young man in Jerusalem, the yeshiva bocher, who was supplementing his meager stipend as a student by fishing. A certain kind of fishing. He was actually going out at pre-dawn hours and fishing in the cracks at the wall to pull out certain notes. And he was making these notes because people sometimes put bills in there. And he was making some weeks as much as $600. Now, how did they find him? Because he found one particular note that happened to be an American check. And it was written out to the Holy Wall in Jerusalem for $100,000. This is true. And he tried to cash it. Is nothing sacred? A yeshiva bocher was stealing from the wall. Now, the truth is, okay, it really is just a wall. I mean, if we think about it, it's just a wall. And after all, what happens to the stuff that goes in there? I don't know if you're aware, but basically it gets taken out as it fills up, and they bury it like holy texts. So why should it be buried? Why should the yeshiva bocher get the benefit of it? It is just a wall. You know, my favorite story about the wall, I've told it before, took place when Richard Nixon visited the wall, and Golda Meir showed him. And she was standing on the woman's side, right over the mechitza, and Richard Nixon went right next to the mechitza, and he said a prayer out loud so that Golda could hear it. He said, and this is the words that have been reported, "Dear God, please make peace between the Jews and the Arabs." And Golda said, "Amen." And then Nixon said, "Please God, let the Jews and the Arabs meet together and work out their differences in peace, not in war." And Golda said, "Amen." And then Nixon added, "Please let the Israelis give back all the land that they took in war so that the Arabs will make peace." And Golda said, "You're talking to a wall." It's supposed to be a true story. I don't know if it is. You know, we're blessed as a congregation now with an exquisite chapel and this beautiful renovated sanctuary. And the truth is, our people have created beautiful buildings all over the world to worship in and gather. Some of you have visited them in your travels. And some of these beautiful buildings don't have much of a congregation left, but the buildings are still beautiful. And yet, that aging, broken, retaining wall in Jerusalem brings more tears and prayers from Jews and non-Jews than any of the most beautiful buildings anywhere. Maybe it's because of the history of the wall. Maybe it's because of the sacrifice that was made in reclaiming it. Maybe it's because of the pain of the centuries of oppression and suffering that our people have felt everywhere. There are probably as many reasons as there are visitors to the wall, but one thing is certain. There really isn't a better symbol for our people, for Jews, than this broken ancient structure. Because we know from first-hand experience, this is far from a perfect world. This is, in fact, a broken world, and it remains one that needs repair. And the truth is that the world is not Hollywood. It isn't Disneyland. It's real, and it's our job to try and make it better. And we know this because we're a people obsessed with memory. Our tradition tries to remind us of past times, of lessons taught, of transcendent ideas, of dreams that we've carried through the ages. You know, it wasn't really long ago, it was really just a couple of months ago that I heard a song on the radio, and that wasn't it. No, I would have recognized that song. No, I heard a song on the radio, and I have to tell you, it was the first time in 50 years I'd heard this song. 50 years, a little over 50 years actually. And it was a young voice of Conway Twitty singing It's Only Make Believe. I don't know how many of you remember that song, It's Only Make Believe. And when I heard that song, I was immediately transported back to a playground at Farragut Elementary School in Culver City, California. It was recess, and in Los Angeles at that time, we were very progressive, we were allowed to dance at recess to the 45 records that we would bring from home. And that was my first record. I had just won it at a party that I'd been at, and I was so proud. I brought this record of Conway Twitty, and we were dancing to it. And listening to those words and listening to that music brought back this flood of memories. I could smell the perfume on the girl I was dancing with. I could hear the tetherball game that was being played right to the side of where we were dancing, and I could feel what it felt like as a young boy for a moment to flirt and to feel my heart pounding and the sweat coming off of me at that moment. All that from just a song that I heard for the first time in a long time. Rabbi Karen Kadar says that music is the sound of our humanity brushing up against our divinity. Music is the sound of our humanity brushing up against our divinity. Our traditions are all meant to return us to our past. We're supposed to relate through our rituals and teachings, to our human existence, our Jewish particularity, and our individual memories. That's why Rosh Hashanah is called in the Torah Yom HaZikaron, Day of Remembering. The Day of Remembering. We come back to synagogue, and perhaps it's the first time in a long time we've been back in synagogue. But we come back really to remember. Now, this space we've created is new, but it holds really the collective memories of all the New Years that we as individuals have ever experienced. Chief Rabbi of Great Britain, Jonathan Sacks, says this about buildings, about synagogues. The divine presence lives not in a building, but in its builders, not in a physical space, but in the human heart. The truth is that we bring Rosh Hashanah here. We, through our memories, through what we bring in to this moment, our expectations, our hopes, and our dreams, we do all of that. This is Yom HaZikaron. This is a day to remember our hopes and aspirations, our dreams, and our disappointments, to remember our childhood, and to remember our presenthood. So, how does a place then become holy? Well, there are some places that are holy because of the blood that was spilled there. This is the 150th anniversary of the start of the Civil War. That event still has an imprint on this country after 150 years. Joni and I, this summer, were privileged to walk the fields of Gettysburg. I know many of you have. And we were near where Lincoln was when he spoke those incredible words of the Gettysburg Address in 1863. And what he said about consecration made sense for that place. He said, in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it, far above our power to add or detract. That's one way to consecrate, through the deeds of heroic acts. But that isn't how we consecrate this space or other spaces. There's a beautiful little poem by a poet that I discovered this year named Yehoshua November. Simple words. Sometimes a man will start crying in the middle of the street without knowing why or for whom. It is as though someone else is standing there, holding his briefcase, wearing his coat, and from beneath the rust of years come to his tongue the words of his childhood. I'm sorry, and God, and do not be far from me. And just as suddenly, the tears are gone, and the man walks back into his life, and the place where he cried becomes holy. Last Friday night, for the first time, we were allowed to hold services in here when we got our TCO. We've only held services in here that one night before tonight. This is the first run-through, if you will, of how we get everything together and try and make it work. And there were 3 acts last Friday night that I would say hallowed this sanctuary, consecrated it. The first was the conversion of a wonderful young woman who has committed her life to become a part of our people. The second were the wonderful words of Torah and prayer that were spoken here for the first time in this new reconfigured space. But perhaps the most beautiful part of the consecration were that some of our members, when they walked in, shed tears. Tears of joy, tears of happiness at being home again and seeing the warmth and beauty that had been created here. Those tears, like that man in the street, helped consecrate this place. But the truth is, this place is about us, not about walls, not about colors and fabric, not about carpets, and not even about ark and Torah mantles. It's about us. It's about who we are. And Yom HaZikaron, that day of remembrance, is our remembering who we are as well as who we were. Tonight we're supposed to get a perspective on our lives by thinking who we were and who we are today. We're supposed to think of the collective history of our people, but also of our personal history, to try and understand where we've come, not only in this last year, but in our lives. I mentioned Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the chief rabbi of Great Britain. He just published a new machzor on Rosh Hashanah, and in it he lists 9 different reasons for the importance of Rosh Hashanah. I want to focus just on 3 of them. First, he says that Rosh Hashanah reminds us that life is not easy, and we should never look at it through rose-colored spectacles. That's his words. I would say glasses, but he's British. We shouldn't look at it through rose-colored spectacles. Life is not easy. We're commanded to look squarely at the pain of life, our own lives, and the life around us. We're reminded as well that if we really think about our past, we realize through the pain we prevailed. We got through it. We grew. We got stronger. Whatever we're going through now, we can do that again. If we think of the history of what went on in the past and what's going on now, if we think of the weakened economy and we think of the wars that we're fighting, just remember what this country has gone through. The crash of '29 and the Great Depression, and then the Dust Bowl. What was it like during that decade? And yet, we built out of that. Is there a more horrific event than our people suffered in the Holocaust? And yet, have we ever been stronger? Ever in our history? I would say never. There never has been a better time to be a Jew living than today. And we as individuals, we've all suffered loss. We've all suffered pain. We've all had difficulties. But we've come through it. We are stronger. We are better because of it. Remember who you were and who you are today. It's a day of remembrance for our people, for our nation, for us, for all. This year I was privileged to meet the president of Tulane University, Scott Cowan. He actually is a Cohen, Scott Cowan. He's really a committed Jew. He's very active there. He visits the Hillel very often. And he is a survivor of Hurricane Katrina. And on the Today Show, he was asked how did he survive. And these are his words. He said that he had survived after 6 days. He finally got out. Those 6 days were difficult. But he got out using a boat, hot wiring a golf cart, hitchhiking, flagging down a helicopter, and finally taking refuge in the city of Houston. And on the Today Show, they asked him, how could a college president know to do all those things? And he said, I wasn't born a college president, I was born in New Jersey. But he also said these words. He said, as bad as it was then, our city, New Orleans, is far stronger now than it has ever been. I would not wish this on any city, but without it, we could not have transformed our educational, health, and social services into the shining example they've become in the wake of the tragedy. You wouldn't wish it on anyone, but out of that came a stronger New Orleans. It's still coming back. And he said that he learned the lessons of survival by studying the Holocaust, the survivors of the Holocaust. He said they show a resilience, that they recognized the reality of their lives. They recognized who they were and where they had been, and they found creative ways to commit themselves to the future through their reimagining what life could be in a new world. Now this year we commemorated the 10th anniversary of 9/11. I want you to know that the way I commemorate 9/11 every day is that I wear a kippah all day, every day, wherever I am. Obviously, I'm not an Orthodox Jew, but I wear it because 9/11 affected me. I wanted to be seen as someone who stood for something. I wanted to be seen as a part of our people, no matter where I was or what I did. And I carry that with me every day on my head. I carry it because it's a symbol for me of something greater than I am, of what I represent, of our tradition, of being an American, of freedom in this world, and that I don't want those who would destroy this to think that I'm afraid of them. I'm not. And I don't believe this protects me in any way. But I grew out of that, and we all did. And our nation continues to grow. And yes, we have difficulties. And yes, there are tensions. And some of us are afraid. I wish we weren't. This is a glorious time to live. There hasn't been a better time, not just for Jews, but for human beings, than living in this world. You know, a few weeks ago, I had something happen to me out of the blue, one of those health things, and I went to our internationally renowned ophthalmologist, Dr. Norman Jaffe, who found two things in my eye. First, there was no tumor, thank God. It was nothing terrible. It was just what they call a floater. Some of you may know what that is. I didn't. I do now. And the second is, apparently I need glasses for distance. Over the years, as I've gotten older, I guess the eyes have gotten worse, and I didn't notice it. So now I have some glasses for driving, and hopefully that'll make me a better and safer driver. I know Joni doubts that, but apparently others do as well. So, what is this floater in my eye? I got this thing that I keep seeing out here floating around that looks like it's out here, but it's actually in my eye. And there's nothing they can do about it. It just eventually, over time, I guess, just floats down to the bottom, I guess, and eventually disappears. But I thought about that notion of that floater. In a sense, that is another reason we come back to synagogue, to see what isn't here, but is in here, in our eye, in our mind's eye. The Baal Shem Tov said everything we see is simply a reflection of ourselves. To see those who aren't here anymore, that we built our lives on, but they're still here. I can still reach out and see them here. They're floating here in my life, even if they're not physically here anymore. That floater, that Yom HaZikaron, that time is now. We came into a world where we were blessed with those who came before us, who changed the world. I remember again in elementary school seeing kids in iron lungs and wearing the remains of the ravages of polio. Salk and Sabin changed that. I remember taking the shot and the little sugar cube. Many of us do. They changed us. Those individuals changed our lives and changed the life of millions. Now, most of us are not going to be able to do that. This summer we saw something that happened from one person. There was this woman in Israel who on Facebook said she wanted her society to be fairer. She wanted the rents to come down. She wanted people to be able to have the dream of Israel. And so, she went on Facebook and said, I'm putting a tent out in Tel Aviv. Join me. And tens of thousands of people came out and a movement has started. Now, you and I probably aren't going to start a movement. But I want you to know this is the 70th anniversary of Beth Sholom, and it was started by two men sitting on a bench who said, you know, there are enough Jews up here now in North Beach. We ought to start a synagogue. And because they acted on that, 70 years later, we're here. They didn't just talk it, they walked that walk. So we may not even start, you and I, another synagogue. But there are things we can do to change things. And I read a story that kind of brought it home to me. This was an old man gets on a bus. This happened not so long ago. Got on this bus every day and said good morning to the bus driver. The bus driver grunted, as bus drivers are wont to do. Finally, by the 5th day, the bus driver deigned to say good morning back. And so the guy said, my name is Benny. What's your name? Bus driver said, Ralph. Well, every day now this dialogue spread, and pretty soon the regular bus riders were saying good morning as well. And we're talking to each other. And we're smiling. And we're certainly saying hi to Benny as he came through, as he talked to everybody. After a period of time, the bus was a very different kind of place. And then one day, Benny didn't show up. And then another day, Benny didn't show up. And people kind of went back to their old pattern. And they didn't know what happened to Benny. But after 3 days, a student, young student who was on that bus every day, started saying good morning. And it brought back Benny. And they all smiled again. And they started talking to each other again. That kid remembered Benny and changed the bus again, just as Benny had. We can do that. We may not be able to solve disease or start a movement or start a new synagogue, but we can make people uplifted. We can make them smile. We can do that if we remember the ones who came before us and what they offered us. We're here on this day because of those people who gave us life and who gave us the blessings of this life. You know, some of us here don't believe in God, or have trouble with God, or have trouble with prayers and the notion of coming to synagogue. And that's okay, as long as we understand that we're not really here about God, we're really here about each other. Because if there is divinity, it is in each and every one of us. I remember Rabbi Shlomo Riskin told about a shul that he davened in Germany after the war, where they were all survivors. And whenever the prayers were said, you know what the survivors did? They all talked out loud. All of them. They didn't pray. They walked around the room. They shouted to each other. They shouted out the window. But when the rabbi spoke, they were quiet. Amazing. And afterward, Rabbi Riskin asked someone why. He said, they can't forgive God. They can't. But they're traditional. They still need to come to shul. So they show God they're on strike. Whenever God is being prayed to, they talk. They'll listen to the rabbi, but they won't listen to God. But they show up. They're there because they're Jews, and they recognize it's a community. We're here to remember our traditions. We're here to remember the brilliance of our traditions, of Torah, of lessons we can learn from life. You know, I saw an ad campaign this year. I don't know if you saw it, from Diesel. Have you seen the ad campaign about being stupid from Diesel? You haven't seen it? It was launched in Israel, actually. I don't know why. But also in Europe. Diesel, multi-million-dollar group, hired a major advertising campaign, and the theme is Be Stupid. That's what it says. Be stupid. Stupid is good for you. Stupid is good for you. It says, smart listens to the head, stupid listens to the heart. Stupid is fearless. Trust stupid. That's stupid. And we know it is because we're Jews. And it's no great shame to be poor, but it's a terrible shunda to be ignorant. There is no excuse for elevating stupidity and saying there's anything good about that. It isn't. And the reason we know is because our Torah tells us, because our tradition tells us, and it has given us a culture where we know that seeking knowledge is the core of who we are and what we should be. I like to eat, you like to eat, we're Jews, right? We like to eat. I like spicy food. I like hot peppers. I like garlic. How many of you like garlic? It's really good, isn't it? You know what happens when you eat garlic? You smell it, you taste it, it's all that wonderful aroma, but after a while you don't smell it anymore, right? You know why? Because it has permeated you, and now it has changed you into a garlic machine. You smell of garlic for someone that doesn't have garlic. But if you meet someone who's been eating garlic and you've been eating garlic, you don't know. You don't smell each other. You know? Sin is like that. We get so used to bad habits, we don't see them anymore. Culture can be like that. We absorb ideas, and we don't even know we've absorbed them. But our tradition keeps bringing us back to good ideas, ideas that have been tested over thousands of years. We're here to reaffirm those ideas and to take them back with us and to give us strength. And I want to tell you one final story, because it has to do with what I began with the idea of music. Music and divinity and our souls. The founder of Chabad, 7 generations of Rebbes ago, Schneur Zalman of Liadi, he had once an event where he was in a shul and he saw a Russian peasant outside the shul, right by the door, standing there. And after he asked this peasant, "Who are you?" And he said, "I was a foundling. I was laid at the step of a good couple who raised me, but I don't know who I am. But there's something that keeps drawing me back to Jews." And the Rebbe thought this must have been a Jewish couple that left this little boy because they were being pursued by anti-Semites to save the life of their child. They had left him with his Christian couple. And he didn't know that. So the Rebbe told him some words of Torah. And he asked the boy, "Do you understand?" He said, "Niet." So then he told him a Hasidic tale. Said, "Do you understand?" He said, "Niet." So then he started humming a nigun, just a little Hasidic melody, no words. And pretty soon the young boy was humming with him, and then they started dancing. And then the boy started crying. And he said, "Now I understand." The Hasidim say there are 10 levels of prayer, but above the 10 is song. So let's sing on this day. I found out this year that one of the most covered songs in all of history started out as a Hasidic nigun, started out as a simple, beautiful little melody without words. And then it was taken by a great musicologist, Dr. Abraham Idelson, who put a few words to it, made the melody grow, brought it a little more upbeat, and it has been covered by Jews and non-Jews. It is loved by Jews. It is loved by non-Jews. And I went on YouTube and got to listen to it in ways I'd never heard it, sung by the Eagles, the Mop Tops, Bob Dylan, Harry Belafonte, a Chinese choir, Dick Dale and the Deltones, and Chuck Berry. The words are very simple and poignant. Cantor Siegel's going to lead us in it in a moment. The words are, "Let us rejoice and we will be happy. Wake up with a joyous heart." 70 years ago, Temple Beth Sholom was founded. It's a renewed year. We've come back to remember. We've come back to be filled with meaning. It's time to rejoice in our lives, to rejoice in who we were and who we are today. It's time to celebrate through joy in this new year. Shana Tova Metuka, happy 5,772. May it be a year of sweetness and joy for all of us. Now, let us sing.